Direct Connection is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you. Live from Maryland Public Television, this is Direct Connection with Jeff Salkin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for Direct Connection. Later in our health segment, an embarrassing problem, but one that is not without good treatment options that's coming up. First tonight, political leaders turn frosty in a dispute over air conditioning. Joining us is Baltimore County Executive Kevin Kamenetz. Sir, thank you for being with us.
Happy to be here, Jeff.
Everybody is happy to see some nice, cool fall weather coming in.
You're right.
So this issue arose roughly a month ago. Baltimore County schools, those without air conditioning, had to close a few afternoons because of the heat. How many schools don't have AC?
Well, let me just give you a little background. When I took office 5 years ago, I inherited what I consider to be the twin dilemma of rising enrollment and aging infrastructure. So 80% of our schools are more than 40 years old, and when I took office, just 48% of our schools were air conditioned. We recognized we had to deal with our infrastructure in terms of not just air conditioning, but modernizing our schools, adding Wi-Fi technology, adding public safety components, and importantly, eliminating all current and projected overcrowding. So we embarked on a $1.3 billion Schools for Our Future program, of which the county is putting up 69% of the pie, and the state 31%. So as opposed to a one-to-one match, which customarily occurs, we've put in more than $2 of county dollars for every state dollar. And right now, with this current fiscal year, we've gone from 48% air conditioned to 85% air conditioned, and we'll get the job done, not just air conditioning, but all of the modernization aspect by 2021.
Did Baltimore County fall behind somehow? I mean, the other big school systems, PG, Montgomery, they're air conditioned, right?
Well, I want you to think about Baltimore County when we grew up as a suburb, and actually was probably before those counties. We grew up in the 50s and 60s, and as a result, that's when our schools were built. So in terms of maintenance, we kept up with maintenance, but we didn't always address some of the future needs.
Comptroller Peter Franchot has suggested delicately that the county should just put in some window units.
Was he delicate with that? Okay.
I was being facetious, but he said, and it's a good question, why not, and other counties have done this, why not just any classroom with a window, and they all have windows, for the couple of months where this is an issue, we'll do a patchwork solution.
Yeah, it sounds good, and I think he said that we should just rent a U-Haul and go to Home Depot and load up on air conditioners and just simply plug them in. But when we talk about the age of the buildings, 40 years old, so is the wiring. All right, they wouldn't be able to handle the power surge that's necessary. I even had one teacher write to me whose school was scheduled for renovation. She says, I can't even keep my laptop plugged in without blowing fuses. But there's also a cost factor because the state doesn't pay for window units. They've already said it's not a good policy. It requires a lot of extra maintenance in terms of the filters, distracts that maintenance person from doing other chores, and ultimately still need to be replaced. And we would be taking the money out of our pie that we're using to give a cure to kind of have a Band-Aid solution that's only temporary. That means we have less of the big picture items that we could get done using those same dollars.
Let's grab a phone call. Baltimore County, this is John. John, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Kamenetz, as a financial planner, I heard the other day on the radio someone suggest that the county should use its surplus funds to pay for air conditioning. And as a taxpayer, I'd be concerned that if you did that, the county's credit could be harmed moving forward. And it might end up costing us all more money. Am I right on that fact?
Thank you for the call.
Yeah, John, you're absolutely right. Baltimore County is a fiscally well-managed county. We have a AAA bond rating from all 3 rating agencies in New York. We're just one of 40 counties across the country to have that coveted AAA. One of the reasons we have that AAA bond rating is because we have a healthy surplus that's set aside. Half of it is for rainy day funds. The other half we use to pay for one-time projects. But we're very careful in what we expend, and quite frankly, if we depleted our surplus, as one state senator was suggesting we ought to run out and do, we would actually jeopardize that bond rating so that when we did borrow money to pay for schools, we'd pay a higher rate of interest, so it would cost us even more money.
People who watch state politics see some early evidence maybe of the next statewide election here. Comptroller Francho said to be contemplating a run for governor. Governor Hogan looking at re-election. You rumored to be looking at statewide office. Absent that dynamic, would the Board of Public Works have been talking about Baltimore County air conditioners?
Well, look, the Sun papers offered an editorial suggesting that their motivation really was political, because I think they recognize we had the facts on our side. I'm just here doing my job. I have 3 years left in my contract, and I'm going to keep working as hard as I can on behalf of Baltimore County residents.
So what do you want parents to know? Hopefully the real heat is behind us for this year, but
until June.
Next spring's going to arrive, and we're going to have this again. What do you want those parents to know?
Well, what we said is we can get the job done by 2021, and that's where we're actually putting 50% greater capital resources into school construction money using county dollars. We said that if the state would simply advance us that 31% share, that is, don't schedule it out over a number of years, if they kind of funded it, we're not asking for more money, we just want them to give us the state share sooner. If they would do that, we can get the job done by 2019.
If the money's coming in anyway, and you're a county government with a strong bond rating, can't you borrow? Couldn't you basically advance it to yourself?
No, because basically you have a set pie of money that you want to borrow and still be within your debt limit. So if we were to expand that pie, so to speak, that would hurt our credit rating because we're borrowing more than we can afford to, according to the experts. The fact that we're putting in 50% more funds means that someone else, some other area of the county, has a smaller slice of the pie, but that's still part of how we're going to manage.
A couple other topics I want to get to, but if you were able to go back in time and talk to some of your predecessors, is there anything that Baltimore County could have been doing over the last 50 years that would have solved this problem sooner?
No, look, there might have been issues at the time that they chose where to focus on. We're a very large county, very diverse population, but we're also large geographically, 610 square miles. We have 8,800 road miles that we have to maintain and resurface. Obviously, we continue to invest in police and fire department. So these are all choices that each executive had to make at that time. I'm not critical of that. I'm just trying to get the job done now.
Let me remind our viewers, if you have a question for the county executive, give us a call. We'll have the number up on the screen. You could also tweet a question. Our Twitter address is @MPT News. Let's talk about police body cameras for a minute. You've decided to move forward on that. Yes. What's going to happen?
Well, we have a pretty good relationship between the police and the community we serve, and over the last couple of years, I've worked very hard to increase the diversity of our police force. A third of our recruit class has been minority. We've made minority promotions, not only with the rank and file, but also at the higher levels of leadership. So our number 2 police officer happens to also be African American. But we also recognize that we are just one bad decision by a police officer away from having a tragedy and therefore bad relations. So we decided that in order to not rest on our laurels but to be ahead of the curve, we think body cameras make sense for police officers. First of all, it will improve the dialogue between the police officer and the citizen in any encounter. Both sides are going to be on better behavior.
So it sounds like you're saying it's a break on the police officers, but also that it's everybody behaves better for the most part when the camera's on.
Aren't we both behave well right now?
Beats 15 minutes ago. Let's take another call in Anne Arundel County. This is Tim. Tim, thank you for calling. Go ahead. Tim? Great call. Thank you very much. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the police cameras is that the FOP, police union in Baltimore County, I don't know how strongly against it they are, but came out against it.
They did. And then we announced that we were moving forward, and we had a task force, and the task force suggested we don't have to go ahead right now. And the chief and I overruled that recommendation and made a decision to proceed. Right after we made that decision, there was an incident in which a white police officer shot and killed an unarmed black man. And the community was very concerned about what the facts were about that. Well, it just so happens that there was a camera on a building that happened to film the entire incident, and you see the police officer approaching with his gun drawn, but then the next scene, you see the officer retreating with his gun drawn and clearly yelling at the offender, and the offender came on and almost jumped on top of the police officer with his hand behind his back. And as soon as he whipped out his hand in the front, that's when the officer made that decision that I'm fearful of my own life. So once we showed that video, I think it calmed the waters. And that's really the power of a video. It answers some unanswered questions, and you get an immediate sense of what was that officer's perspective.
What do you do about some of the privacy concerns that an officer is wearing a camera, walks in on a domestic situation? Then there's the issues about how do you archive it all and who has access? Where's that going to go?
Great questions. What we'll do is between now and when we start implementing it by July 1, officers will develop standard operating procedures in which that will dictate when a camera goes on, when it does not go on. But also, we will be able to redact information, very similar to a police report today. If a public asks for a copy of a police report, we'll redact the victim's name, we'll redact witnesses' names, we'll redact sensitive information. It can also be done with the video in the same way. It's just more time consuming. And obviously there are cloud storage opportunities. But we're anticipating hiring at least 15 more people whose job it will be to handle these requests.
Wow. Baltimore County, this is Tim. Tim, thank you for the call. Go ahead.
Hi, how you doing? Basically, I was just asking, if he thought that if Kevin thought it was a good idea to have the cameras or not have them. And also, I just want to say that you're very involved in the explosion down on 68th Street. Every kind of incident that takes place, I've noticed that since you've been in office, you're very on top of the community and what's going on around you.
Tim, thank you very much for the phone call.
Tim and I are not related. Okay. Thank you, Tim. That was really nice of you to say. I hope my wife is watching this.
There's one other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and that was Sparrows Point, which everybody remembers as Bethlehem Steel, thousands of good blue-collar jobs gone back before World War II. That went out of business as a steel mill, and it's being totally redeveloped, and you have pretty high hopes there.
Well, we remember Bethlehem Steel as employing 30,000 direct jobs and really supporting generations of families in the Dundalk area. When RG Steel closed, it was just 2,000 jobs. And when that was approaching, we put together a task force to kind of see that the handwriting was on the wall and come up with a new game plan of jobs for the future. What we found is that we have a great asset here, unique to the entire East Coast, and that is 3,000 acres of land that's already zoned industrial in nature, has deepwater port access, and access to 2 rail lines and 2 interstate highways. So we believe that port expansion is a great opportunity there because that's the economic engine in the state of Maryland right now. If we had port activity, we could then have logistics and distribution types of warehouses and assembly facilities. We're very bullish. We think I had hoped when we put together this plan that we will have 10,000 jobs within the next 10 years there, plus a large number of temporary construction jobs. Now that I've worked with the new ownership team, I'm really bullish that we're going to see that 10,000 jobs within 10 years.
So it's going to be its own marine terminal and warehouses, logistics, and all that.
Yes. It's a perfect location. They're getting a lot of interest. And what we have now with the current ownership, Sparrows Point Terminal, is a company and people who respect the venerable history of the property, but also want the highest and best use. This, to me, will be the next generation of jobs that will support the future.
Let's grab one more phone call. Also, Baltimore County, this is Sharon. Sharon, thanks for the call. Go ahead.
Hi, yes, I was wondering, Kevin, what you will be doing about the shortage of Baltimore County bus drivers that we've had in the last 3 years.
Thanks very much. Do we have a shortage?
I don't know. It's a
tough job.
Yeah, it is. In fact, you got unruly kids, and you have to deal with driver safety, and really you are in charge of those kids. It is difficult, and it doesn't pay much, and you also have to work different shifts. We actually, a couple of years ago, recognized that this would be a good job for retired police officers, and we carved out some exceptions that still allow them to collect their police pension, but also work as bus drivers. So we're always open to figuring out some good ideas like that.
Kevin Kamenetz, the Baltimore County Executive, thanks for coming by.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Jeff.
Appreciate it. We're back with our Your Health segment right after this.
Next time, Antiques Roadshow visits the Emerald City, Seattle, Washington.
It was priced at $40, and I thought, well, I think I'll get it.
Are you serious?
I'm serious as a heart attack.
Awesome! I can't believe this. I didn't expect that, so.
Don't miss these appraisals and many more next time on Antiques Roadshow.
Tonight at 8 on MPT.
Next time on I'll Have What Phil's Having.
It's not just the beauty of Paris that keeps calling me back.
Bonsoir.
I get direct calls from pastries.
Some bombe de vanille, so vanilla bomb.
And chickens.
To chicken.
There are still great chefs I haven't met yet.
Yeah.
And lots of food that hasn't met me.
Cheers.
All this and more on the next I'll Have What Phil's Having.
Tonight at 10 on MPT.
It's a sheep and wool festival on the next Maryland Farm and Harvest. She sheared 10,000 sheep.
What's the secret? The animal is controlled.
Then have a sip of local spirits.
We decided to sell some corn to Blackwater Distilling.
All that and more on Maryland Farm and Harvest.
Tuesday night at 7 on MPT.
Joining us for this week's Your Health segment is Dr. Harry Johnson, Associate Professor of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences at the University of Maryland School of Medicine and Director of Urogynecology and Pelvic Reconstruction at the University of Maryland Medical Center. Doctor, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
We want to focus on urinary incontinence, more of an issue for women.
Well, the area that I work in primarily is women. It's a problem that occurs somewhere between 30 and 80% of women will have urinary incontinence of some sort.
That's a huge range. Does that mean it's hard to specifically define it?
Well, it's a problem that a lot of people don't like to discuss. It's a problem that some people have been told is something that happens with aging, and it's something that you don't necessarily have to tell your doctor or report. So that's why we have such a wide range of incidents of this problem.
Is it a normal part of aging?
It's not a normal part of aging. There are treatments available.
What are the causes?
Well, there are two main types of urinary incontinence. One is stress incontinence, which is loss of urine with laugh, cough, sneeze. And then there's urge incontinence, which is the loss of urine with the urge to go to the bathroom, which means you can't make it there. And there's different treatments for each one.
Are there different causes for each one?
Well, urge can be more associated with neurologic injury, with aging, whereas stress incontinence can be more associated with childbirth injuries that injure support structures to the bladder.
Where do you start when somebody brings in this issue?
Well, the first thing you do is take a careful history and you talk to the patient about what type of symptoms they have. Are they having urge symptoms? Are they having stress type symptoms? Or do they have a combination of both? Because you can have mixed incontinence.
And where do you go from there?
Well, after you have a careful history, you do a physical examination, look for injuries that may have occurred from childbirth. We do testing on the bladder and the urethra to see how the bladder muscle works and how the urethra works, and try to figure out what the cause of the incontinence is to direct our treatments.
Is there anything you can do for prevention? Are there exercises, or is there something, in the childbirth process to look out for?
Well, actually, there are exercises that you can do, and you do after childbirth, and you can do it for the rest of your life, but it's called pelvic floor physical therapy. One of the more common exercises is something called Kegel exercises, which help strengthen the pelvic floor muscles.
How effective is that?
Well, it depends. It's probably around 50%, depending on the problem that you have and why you've developed the incontinence, but it is the first line treatment choice for treatment of incontinence, both urge and stress.
What's the second line treatment?
Well, for urge incontinence, we have medications that we try. There's several different medications that affect the muscles of the bladder. After that, we have a new treatment, relatively new, which is Botox injections to the bladder, which affect the muscle. We have neurologic treatments where we actually implant a neurostimulator that stimulates nerves of the pelvic floor that affect the bladder. For stress incontinence, primarily after pelvic floor exercises, it's a surgical treatment.
What does the surgery consist of?
Well, the most common surgery that we do for stress incontinence today is a sling, which is to put a support underneath the urethra.
So talk about the range of difficulty of any of these alternatives. If women are reluctant to bring this forward, in part maybe there's some embarrassment, but maybe in part it's fear of and uncertainty about how the treatment options are going to work out.
Yeah, for urge incontinence, the treatment options, sometimes you have to try different medications and you see how they work before you know whether they're going to be effective or not. So some will work and some won't, and you approach the problem in a stepwise fashion. So when one treatment fails, you move to the next treatment. As far as surgery goes, there are complications from surgery, which are relatively rare, but they are real. So anytime I think somebody contemplates a surgical procedure, they're worried about complications from that.
How difficult a procedure? Are we talking a hospital stay?
The surgical procedure that we do for incontinence is a sling, which is a same-day surgical procedure. Generally takes 15 to 20 minutes to perform. You're able to go home the same day. Recovery is usually a couple of weeks, but you recover relatively quickly.
Among people who don't have this issue, do they have anything in common? Somebody who makes it through, and I should ask to what degree having kids affects this, but the people who don't suffer from it, do you find anything in there that might be useful for other folks?
Well, what we've really found is problems that can lead to an increased risk of incontinence. We don't know necessarily why people that don't have incontinence didn't develop it, but there are lifestyle things that can affect this problem besides childbearing. One of the big things is aging, lack of estrogen, smoking, obesity, heavy jobs, which involve heavy lifting, physical type things, can all lead to incontinence over time.
And is there a direct correlation between number of kids, childbirth?
Well, the more kids you have by vaginal delivery, the more likely you are to have a problem. So it has been associated with increased number of vaginal births.
Is there any relationship to infections in that part of the urinary tract? Does that correlate at all?
Not really. That's really a different problem. That can be associated with aging and lack of estrogen, but it really has not been shown to lead to incontinence.
What's the first step for somebody who thinks they may have a problem with this?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is talk to your physician. Whether you come to a specialist in urinary incontinence or you talk to your primary physician. It's a problem that you should talk to your doctor about. It's a problem that does have some simple treatments that can be handled by a primary care physician before you're referred to a specialist. But the biggest thing is just get started on a treatment.
And is there any harm in waiting?
There's not really a harm in waiting, but the biggest problem that I see is people that have fairly severe incontinence will avoid social activities and tend to stay in the house, avoid going out in public, seeing their friends, things like that. So it can be very socially debilitating.
Dr. Harry Johnson, University of Maryland. Sir, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us for Direct Connection. We are back Thursday at this time with Your Money and Business. For all of us at MPT, have a good night.
Your health segments are a co-production of Maryland Public Television and the University of Maryland Medical System.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.